Coming up on today's episode of the Salesman Podcast.
Your brain makes emotions. Emotions don't happen to you. They are made by your brain for particular situations that you're in. Your brain is always regulating your body, and your body is always sending information back to your brain. And you feel that information from the tug of, the tug of your lungs expanding, the rush of your blood through your veins, the beating of your heart.
Hello, Sales Nation. My name is Will Barrett, and I'm the host of the Salesman Podcast, the world's most downloaded B2B sales show. On today's episode, amazing episode, we have Dr. Lisa Barrett. She's the author of How Emotions Are Made, and that's exactly what we're diving into in today's show. We're diving into how the buyer emotions are made in their brain, whether it's happiness, whether it's buyer's remorse, whatever it is. We also dive into how to influence other people's emotions, and we cover some of the nonsense that sales trainers have been talking about influencing other people and their emotions over the decades. Lisa dives into that and debunks a whole ton of it. Everything that we talk about in this episode is available in the show notes over at salesman.org. And with that said, let's jump right into it. And we're going to talk some science, we're going to talk emotions, and we're going to hopefully be able to discuss where what I'm going to call buying emotions come from. So that might be happiness if you buy the right product. It could be the fear of missing out if there's an offer or a deal in place. It could be, unfortunately, regret or buyer's remorse. I want to dive into where all these come from, and then hopefully how we can help buyers have better buying experiences moving forward. So before the obvious question of where the heck do buying emotions come from, I want to tee things up with asking you, are we in control of our emotions? Because sometimes it seems like I can choose to be happy, I could choose to change my state of mind, but sometimes emotions come in crashing and hit us, like a car crash, I guess, a car wreck. So are we in control of the emotions that we feel?
Well, that's a really hard question, actually. That could be answered in many different ways. I guess the answer would be yes, you are more in control than maybe you think you are, but that control looks very different than what you think it does. Mm-hmm. So your brain makes emotions. Emotions don't happen to you. They are made by your brain for particular situations that you're in. Your brain is automatically constructing emotions out of a set of ingredients, and you have control over seeding your brain with those ingredients to make emotions more automatically in an effortless way. But control in the moment, as in stopping feeling one thing and in order to cultivate a different feeling, is extremely hard, I would say. You can, if you're very physically worked up, you can change the meaning of that worked up feeling and therefore change the emotion. But calming your body down is actually extremely hard to do.
Sure.
For anybody.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you've touched on something here that I wanted to come to at the end of the show or later on the show, but we'll address it now. These feelings that we feel, does everyone feel the same feeling, and then we, from societal, I guess, norms, put a label on it of, I feel butterflies and so I feel nervous, excited, versus other people might feel butterflies and have a different association with that feeling, and so they feel a different emotion. What I'm asking is, are emotions ubiquitous and we all feel the same, they can be categorized, or do we add a layer on top of emotions that changes what they actually feel to us personally?
So your brain is always regulating your body, and your body is always sending information back to your brain. And you feel that information from the tug of, the tug of your lungs expanding, the rush of your blood through your veins, the beating of your heart. You experience those sensations as simple feelings of affect, feeling worked up, feeling calm, feeling pleasant, feeling unpleasant. Those aren't emotions. They're simple feelings of mood, or what scientists call affect, They're always with you every waking moment of your life. Your brain's job, in part, is to link the sensations from your body and these affective feelings to the what's going on around you in the world in order to give them meaning so that your brain knows what to do next.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's more than just labeling. What your brain is always doing is categorizing sensations to give them meaning. A way to think about it is like this. Your brain is trapped in a dark, silent box called your skull. It's receiving sense data from the world, like changes in light, changes in sound, pressure, changes in chemicals. It doesn't know what the causes are of these changes. It only receives the outcomes of those causes. So when there's a flash of light or, a loud bang, say a loud bang, what is it? Is it someone slamming a door? Is it a car backfiring? Is it thunder? Is it a gunshot? Depending on what caused that bang, your brain would do different things to keep you alive and well. But your brain doesn't know what caused the sound. It only knows it's receiving the outcome of some change, but it doesn't know what the change is. Similarly, when your brain receives sense data from your body and there's a tug in your chest, is it anxiety? Is it heartburn from having eaten too much? Is it the beginnings of a heart attack? What is it? Your brain doesn't know what it is. It's only receiving the outcome of some cause. This is what philosophers call a reverse inference problem. You get the answers, but you don't know the question. You have to figure out what caused these changes. And so that's what your brain is always doing. It's asking itself, the last time I was in a situation like this, where I had these internal sensations and this feeling, what caused it? What did I do about it? It's asking what is similar to the present moment in my past. And things which are similar in some way are a category. So your brain is basically forming categories to guide your action and create your extended emotional experience out of these sense data. So the question you're asking me, does everyone in the world feel the same thing? The answer is no, but happiness for you is not the same thing each time you feel it, or regret each time you feel it is not the same thing, because your brain is constructing each moment on the fly in a particular situation. So in some situations, when you're happy, you smile. In some situations, when you're happy, you cry. In some situations, when you're happy, you might, pound fists with someone. You do different things. Your body does different things. You feel different things when you're happy, depending on the situation that you're in. So it's not the same even for you from moment to moment.
This is fascinating because I've never pondered on that idea before, and just you bringing that back to me adds different frames of references of what emotions are, which is amazing. And how much of this then is conscious versus subconscious or unconscious?
Mostly unconscious. So your brain is, all of this meaning making is occurring under the hood really automatically. In fact, it's happening. It takes me much longer to describe it to you than it actually takes for it to occur. So when you asked me before, how controllable are your emotions? Well, the meaning making part is easier to control if you think about control over the long term, meaning everything that you experience right now, your brain is able to use in the future to help construct another experience. So in a sense, we're always cultivating our past as a way of controlling our future. So the best way to control your emotions is to give your brain a good, flexible set of options that it can use to construct your emotions with. And then your brain will be very flexible in how it does this on the fly with very little effort from you, right? So you can think of it a little bit like exercising. You invest a lot of energy, and then you replenish that energy because it's a really good investment in having a healthy brain in the future. And similarly, you can construct new experiences for yourself, cultivate new situations, curate new feelings, and that is effortful. But what it does is it's an investment in having a flexible brain that will control your emotions in a way that's more tailored to the situation.
Where does, or I'll put this a different way, how much of this is brain activity and feedback from the body versus a chemical cascade in the brain, where once it starts, literal chemical reactions are happening, and so it's difficult to put a stop to it in that moment?
Well, here's the thing. All neural activity in the brain is both chemical and electrical. Neurons communicate by chemicals, and there's nothing, if you didn't have those chemicals, the neurons could not possibly talk to each other. There's a whole system in your brain of neurons. Their only job is to control other neurons. That's what we call attention. You experience attention from a subjective perspective. Am I looking at this thing? Am I concentrating on this thing? But attention from a neuron's perspective is anything which makes it fire more or less. So you put a stop to the firing of some neurons by other neurons, basically. So, and it's always possible to put a stop it's always possible to turn the dial up or turn the dial down on an assembly of neurons. It's just that your body takes longer to adjust to the neural signals. So it can feel like, you have these moments where nothing is wrong, but you're still worked up anyways, and you really would really, really like that worked up feeling to go away, but it won't. That's because your body is just slower to listen to those signals from your brain.
Amazing. Okay, so that's the baseline there. How do we, and we could very quickly move into the world of manipulation, and that's not what I'm not interested in that. I'm more interested in creating better buying experiences, and I'm sure some of this works better in person than it does kind of over a Skype call or over a phone call. But is there anything we can do as salespeople, as business leaders, to make our customers happier when we engage with them, other than perhaps obvious stuff, like perhaps, I'm assuming this is the case, but smiling seems to be somewhat contagious, and that hopefully it affects the emotions of the people that we're engaging with. Is there anything like that we can do to, I guess, get people to mirror our own emotions?
Yeah, so I have to tell you that the more I learn about this, the more I think that smiling is, I often think of, one day I'm going to write a book called The Tyranny of Happiness, I think. When people smile for the purpose of trying to get me to smile, really what I want to do is give them the finger. Honestly, I don't like being manipulated that way. And I don't think people like being manipulated, actually. So here's what I would say. We are social animals. We regulate each other's nervous systems. In a way, you could think about, the best thing for a human nervous system is another human. The worst thing for a human nervous system is also another human. So if you want to make your customers more comfortable and able to engage in the kind of thoughtful weighing of pros and cons so that they'll be satisfied with a purchase that they make, your job is to help regulate their nervous systems. The way I describe this is body budgeting. Your brain is running a budget for your body. It's not budgeting money, it's budgeting salt and glucose and water and oxygen and all the things your body needs to run. And we make deposits into that body budget by sleeping and eating, and we make withdrawals. The two biggest, most expensive things your brain can do is move your body, like when you're walking or getting out of bed in the morning or exercising, and learning. So when you're giving a client a lot of information, and they have to process that information and make a decision, that is expensive, metabolically speaking. And you can make that process more expensive or less expensive for them, depending on how responsive you are to them. So, we can make metaphorical deposits and withdrawals in other people's body budgets. So rather than smiling, I would suggest, first of all, breathing at a good slow pace, because we mirror each other's breathing patterns, right? So if you and I were actually in a room together and we liked each other and we trusted each other, we would our physiological signals would synchronize. If you're really worked up, I would become really worked up. If you're really calm and you're breathing, at a really good pace, then I would become calmer and breathe at a good pace. We're not aware of doing these things, but it's very, very possible to influence people that way. So, for example, when I was training to be a therapist, a million years ago in another life, one of the things I learned to do was breathe at a pace of about 6 to 8 seconds, because the one way to calm your body down is to breathe in a very paced way. And actually, Navy SEALs use this in order to calm themselves down. That it's really the only way that we know of that you can sort of lower your heart rate, sort of bring your body back down into a more comfortable range. So what I would suggest is, if you want to have a successful selling episode, whatever that means to you, you probably want to do it in a way that leaves your client or customer feeling not happy, but comfortable, which means that you reflect back what they say, you pace your own breathing, so they pace their breathing, and you basically help them make it a less metabolically taxing event.
So you may not, you'll have experienced this, I'm sure, but you may not be consciously aware of all the training that's gone in the past with sales training. So perhaps 10 years ago, we would talk, I wasn't involved in this. This is one of the reasons I started the podcast, have people like yourself on to actually unwrap the science behind some of this. But a lot of sales training was about mirroring the person that you're engaging with, and all these like weird like tricks and hacks and kind of things. Then it went to more of a discussion, I want to get your thoughts on this in a second, on things like discussing mirror neurons. But it would be a non-scientist talking about mirror neurons, trying to use anecdotes and metaphors to describe something that they don't know what they're talking about. So this is why this is really interesting to me, to talk about the actual science of why perhaps some of this may work, may not work. What are your thoughts on the likes of the efficacy or the effectiveness of mirroring body language and things like this? And are mirror neurons relevant to any of this whatsoever?
Mirror neurons don't exist. There's nothing in your brain called a mirror neuron. Yeah. There are neurons in your brain that do what mirror neurons are supposed to do, but they are in many, many, many parts of your brain. There's nothing special. So what I'm trying to say is the function is there, but there are no special neurons that perform this function, okay? Your brain has the capacity to change the firing of its own neurons, okay? If I ask you to imagine a Macintosh apple of the sort that you eat, so in your mind's eye, can you imagine a red apple that you would eat? Okay. And can you imagine picking that apple up, biting into the apple, hearing the crunch of the apple, maybe tasting maybe it's tart with a little sweetness. Can you imagine that in your mind's eye?
I can. And it's probably happening what you're trying to make happen of. I'm slightly salivating as you describe it.
Yeah. Why do you think you're salivating? Because your brain has changed the firing of your neurons, right? Your brain is changing. If we had your head in a brain scanner, we would see that portions of the visual system in your brain would be very active, even though there actually is no apple. Just by merely saying the word apple, this conjures an image in your head. Mm-hmm. Your brain, upon hearing me talk about the crunch and the taste, is actually changing the firing of neurons without the apple there to actually make you salivate to prepare to digest the apple when you eat it. Your brain is basically what we would call simulating. This is what scientists call simulating. It's a fancy word for a bunch of things we do every day, but this is actually how it's exactly the same process that your brain undergoes when it's making sense of information from your body and the world. So when you see someone smile, or you see the raise of an eyebrow, or you see someone move, what your brain is doing is simulating to prepare to deal with that person's action. That's what so-called motor neurons do. But every neuron in your brain, you could think of doing that, acting in that way. It's not something specific to the neurons that are in that little spot. And I guess the thing to say is this, that it is true that if you stick two people in a room who don't know each other, but through the course of conversation, they trust each other, they like each other, it's true that they will spontaneously mirror each other's actions. Like, let's say, Will, that you put your hand up to your face. I might put my hand up to, flick my hair. And then let's say I flick my hair. You might, and I flick my hair and I look to the right. You might also slightly turn your body to the right. I mean, people don't mirror in an exact way, but there is, probabilistically speaking, some, right? But that kind of mirroring, if you actually deliberately try to do it, people notice and they think it's weird.
Of course, it's really weird. It's super weird, isn't it?
It's really weird. However, I can assure you that when you're trying to calm someone down and help them, well, put it this way. I work out with a coach. I've worked out with a coach for 15 years, right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning. Okay. I am much more efficient in my workout when he's there than when he isn't there. It's not just because he's telling me what to do. I'm actually stronger when he's there. And I can do more when he's there. And it's because he's providing body budgeting support for me in a way that I'm not consciously tracking. When you lose someone that you love, when that person leaves you, you break up or they die, you feel like you've lost a part of yourself because you've lost someone who was tending to your body budget, and now you have to do it on your own. And it feels painful because it is. It's harder. So the kind of mirroring that you want to do with someone you don't know very well, would be more like staying calm, modulating your voice, modulate your breathing, and that will make it easier for them to do the same. If they get worked up and you follow them, that just leads to a cycle of everybody getting worked up, as opposed to taking a step back and taking a deep breath, right? With little kids, like with babies, actually, even with my daughter, sometimes I don't depend on mirroring. I get her to come to me, I give her a hug, and I actually breathe slowly, and I get her to pace my breathing, which when she was a baby, all I needed to do was put her on my chest and breathe, and she would calm down just by my breathing. Now that she's 22, I can just say to her, do you want a hug? And then we stand there and we breathe together for a minute, and then she feels she's calmer. Now you can't do that with a customer, but what you can do is if you keep your nervous system calm, you're basically providing support for the other person's nervous system.
Okay, so if the weird manipulative used car sales techniques of the past are a no-go, which is approved. That message is approved on this podcast. Is another way to perhaps influence a person's emotional state, which you just did to me. Should we be using perhaps stories and storytelling to do that?
Yes. Storytelling that allows simulation, right? That allows the person to, this is how, if you notice in both books I've written, I use stories, right? I could throw data up on a screen, but that's not going to convince anybody except maybe another scientist. And even then I would say stories convince people, right? So, what you're trying to do is get someone to be immersed in a narrative that you've created. And that immersion must involve simulation. A person won't feel part of the story unless they're simulating it in the way that I just showed you with the apple.
Because I guess we've also then got to be careful not to be telling stories where we're getting someone to simulate. For example, a lot of sales training is based around this idea of making the buyer feel loads of pain and then giving them a solution. Now, my experience, having experimented with all kinds of different sales techniques and training and all this, is if you make someone feel really bad, they feel really bad, and then you've got to try and shift their emotions from one place to another. It's far easier to go into a conversation being upbeat, perhaps storytell and use positive case studies, as opposed to, again, this might be considered more manipulative of, this is the worst thing that's going to happen, there's this, and this. And I find that leads to then buyer's remorse as opposed to a happy customer on the other end of it. So is there anything that we, with regards to everything that we've spoken about so far, Lisa, is there anything that we should avoid doing to stop people getting into a bad emotional state as opposed to what we've talked about so far as trying to get people into a good one?
Yeah, well, I think there are a couple of things, Will, that come to mind. And I'm going to talk to you as a scientist, but I'm also going to talk to you as a consumer, right? I'm the kind of person who has relationships with the people that I buy things from. So, and I'm very loyal, actually. So I will always go back to the same shop, even if something's a little more expensive there, not like exceedingly expensive more, but just even if it's a little more, I'll go back to that place because I know that person is going to help me in the long run, right? If I trust that person, I'm much more likely to buy from that person. I'm much more likely to take a risk that I normally wouldn't take with a purchase and so on. I think you have to understand what your goal is as a salesperson. Is your goal to make a sale in that moment? Is that the goal, or is the goal to build a relationship with a customer where you will make sales over time to that person? I'm sure sometimes it's one and sometimes it's the other, but you have to think about, what is your goal? Is it a short-term goal or a long-term goal? That's the first thing that will help you. And then the second thing is, remember that your brain, the brain of a person, your brain, my brain, everybody's brain is guessing what negative feelings mean. Those negative feelings aren't emotions. When your body budget is flush, you feel good. When your body budget is taxed, you're running a deficit because maybe you're thinking really hard, or you're physically taxed in some way. What is stress? Stress is just your brain preparing for a big metabolic outlay. That's it. Cortisol is not a stress hormone. It's a hormone that gets glucose into your bloodstream because your brain is predicting you have a big metabolic outlay. That can mean dragging your ass out of bed in the morning. That can mean going to the gym, or it can mean just learning something new and having to kind of reason your way through a complicated purchase. Your brain doesn't know what the negative feeling is about. It has to guess. That customer can guess it's you. So you have to be really careful when you create a negative feeling in someone, because they might attribute the cause to you as opposed to the scenario that you created. So let's say you want someone to simulate negative consequences in order to avoid them. I would do that by inviting them to do it with you. To say, if you really think that this is an important thing to do, you say, can we do a thought experiment? I want us to imagine this kind of a future. Let's imagine these things happen. So you're basically inviting them to be in, to take a little imaginary journey with you. This is something that human brains do exceedingly well. We can simulate into the future, simulate into the past. That's called memory, right? So imagination and memory are both based in exactly the same computation, which is this simulation, ability to conjure experience independent of our immediate circumstances. And one of the reasons why we have so much trouble staying in the present is that our brains are very, very good at mental time travel. So you can invite your customer to do mental time travel with you. And you can invite them, if you present, I'll just say for myself, if somebody presented their product to me as the only solution to a problematic outcome, I probably wouldn't believe them, because there's always more than one. You want to create the context for the person to come to that realization themselves that yours is the best solution. If you try to just tell them that, they might believe you, but they might not. The thing is, if they come to it themselves, they will be more satisfied with the purchase afterwards.
Perfect. Right. I've got two slightly more ridiculous questions that I'm intrigued to know the answers of, Lisa. And we'll wrap up the show with these. Number one, it seems like this could be actually studied. I doubt it's ever been studied. But with this idea of the metabolic deficit and the brain requiring so much energy to process thoughts, and say we're going into a big negotiation, there's lots of learning and guessing and putting together numbers, perhaps. Again, this is not practical, but I think it's interesting to ponder on. Perhaps could you give someone a glucose tablet or something like that before a negotiation? And would that change the outcome of a negotiation if we did it like 200, 500 times?
Well, no, people have done those experiments and the answer is no. And the reason why is that circulating glucose in your blood we don't know exactly what that does to the glucose levels in your brain. And that's actually really what's important. What's important is how your brain is metabolizing as much as what your body is doing. So I would say, if you want to be effective, the best thing that you can do, let's say you want to be effective tomorrow, like today, you and I knew we were having this conversation today, and I don't really know that much about sales from a technical standpoint. I know about sales as a consumer, right? So I need to be sharp for this conversation. So the best thing that I could do is get a good night's sleep last night. I was
just about to ask you, perhaps a better study would be if someone had a power nap before a meeting, or we did 9 a.m. meetings versus 10 p.m. meetings after some pizza and margaritas, which would be probably more effective. So, because that's common sense, right? Although I guess common sense isn't always used as commonly as what it should be.
True, but I would say, get enough sleep, be well hydrated. Again, sounds really crazy, but when people ask me, what can I do to control my emotions? Like, what's the best thing that I can do? I'm like, get enough sleep, keep yourself hydrated, eat healthfully, and exercise. I know I sound like a mother, and I am a mother, but I'm speaking to you as a neuroscientist. Like, if you want to be in control as your nervous system will possibly allow, you have to make sure your body budget is solvent. And if you're running a deficit and you say drink coffee, what are you doing when you drink coffee? And I say this as a committed coffee lover and a tea lover, right? Actually, I don't drink coffee anymore, but tea I still drink. But I love caffeine as much as the next person. But when you drink caffeine, as you might be doing right now, well, as you pick up that cup, what you're doing is borrowing energy from tomorrow that you will spend today. And at some point, we all need to do that at times, right? But at some point, the deficit will catch up with you. And you will feel really unpleasant to the point of feeling distressed and maybe even getting sick. So the point is, just having a glucose tablet is not really going to help you. But being hydrated, getting enough sleep, eating healthfully, those things actually will, in the long run, on average, be better for you. Yeah.
Love it. It's funny you mention this. I actually did a podcast about caffeine consumption a few months ago, because it's almost a stereotype that business people, leaders, salespeople drink a lot of caffeine to try and stay on their game and stay focused. So we did a whole show on the science of it and how it's is blocking different things and how it does what you describe, I guess in a layman's term, of is robbing tomorrow for today. So I've not drunk caffeine in literally months now, and makes that initial kind of week period of headaches after the fact of giving it up, which was alarming to me that it physically had an effect on my brain.
Yeah, but do you know why you have those headaches? You have those headaches because when your brain is controlling your body, it's controlling your body by prediction, not by reaction. So when I talk to you about the apple and you start to salivate, it's because your brain was preparing you. It was predicting there would be an apple, and it was preparing you to digest it. When you drink water and your thirst is quenched by water, you take a drink and you drink a glass of water, you have no more thirst. Actually, it takes 20 minutes for the osmolarity of your blood to change for water to get to your brain. So for 20 minutes, you're not thirsty, but yet the information hasn't made it to your brain yet that you're hydrated. How come you stop feeling thirsty? It's because your brain predicted the consequence of drinking water, because it's had gazillions of opportunities to learn that. And similarly, your brain is really always predicting. So if you have coffee at every morning at the same time, your brain knows it can predict, because you've had this coffee every day at the same time. The coffee has chemicals in it that will constrict the blood vessels in your brain, actually everywhere. So your brain, in anticipation, dilates the blood vessels just before you're about to drink the coffee. But if you don't have the coffee to bring those, to keep the blood vessels stable, they stay dilated and you have a headache.
Love it. I love it. The show is now powered by chamomile tea. Not quite as interesting or as nice. I quite like the routine of making a nice cup of coffee in the morning. That ritual is important to me. But I'm conscious of time, Elise. I've got one final question for you. It's it's on topic with emotions, but it's completely off topic with sales. It's a selfish question. We've just got a golden retriever puppy. Now, he looks like he's happy when he hangs out with me. What I want to ask you, though, is, am I projecting an emotion that perhaps a dog doesn't feel onto it? Because I see his tail wagging. I see his face almost kind of jumps up at the sides. And I know that there is science that shows that dogs, animals that have eyebrows that move in ways that humans can recognize, have done better within socialization for humans, as we what's the word, domesticated wolves over the years. So my question is, Lisa, when my puppy comes over and when he's not biting me at all moments, when he's just chilling, is he happy, or is he am I projecting these kind of feelings and thoughts that humans have onto this animal that's perhaps doesn't have a consciousness?
Yeah. So I talk about this in my book, How Emotions Are Made, and it's, I think, a widely misunderstood chapter. So here's the thing. You don't recognize anything in anybody. Your brain is guessing. When I raise my eyebrows, or I widen my eyes, or I frown, or I scowl, your brain is guessing what that means. You're not recognizing emotions in me, right? So 30% of the time when people are angry, they scowl, which means 70% of the time when they're angry, they're doing something else with their face. They might be concentrating. You might have just told them a bad joke. They might have gas. There are all kinds of reasons why people scowl, right? And you might also, when you're angry, you scowl 30% of the time, but sometimes when you're angry, you cry, sometimes you frown, sometimes you smile, you might even laugh when you're angry, and then you also scowl at other times. So your brain is guessing. It's guessing what a movement means in a particular situation. And then it's checking on its guesses to make sure that you're right? So your brain is predicting what I'm going to do next. And if you predicted well, then you probably means you guessed well, right? Same thing with your dog. Same thing with your dog. What I will say about the dog, though, is that the dog's brain is not the same as a human brain. The dog has these simple feelings of affect. The dog can feel calm. It can feel worked up. The dog can feel pleasant. It can feel unpleasant. I have a puppy too. I got it. I mean, one of the first things we did, like everybody else that we know of, actually during COVID, was we got a puppy. We thought we were being so clever. Everyone else thought they were being clever too, clever and unique, and we were very similar to everybody else. So we got this puppy, and this puppy is, she's very affectionate. Does she love me? She's attached to me because I regulate her body budget and she regulates mine. So she will come and lay on my feet. She likes to be close to me. I also know, she is attached to me because I feed her. Mm-hmm. I feed her and and I make her comfortable. I pet her. So I am the source of body budgeting for her. And she is the source of body budgeting for me. That's also true for your puppy. We experience that with each other as love. But the difference is that I have a concept for love and you have a concept for love, and all the humans in your life have a concept for love. So they can feel love because they can take those simple feelings and transform them into something more. Your dog's brain can't do that.
Are you sure? Because that's really disappointing, Lisa.
No,
you're depressing me.
It's not disappointing. The point is that if you make emotions, then the question of, does X have an emotion? Let me say it differently. Does happiness exist in a dog? Is an unanswerable question. The question is, do you experience your dog as happy? And the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. And if you ask the question, does your dog experience happiness the way you experience happiness? The answer is no.
That's because he's a dog.
Yeah, because he's a dog. But he's attached to you. He can feel pleasant in your company. He can feel unpleasant. He can feel worked up. He can feel calm. And his brain is trying to predict what you're going to do. And mainly his whole job in life is to try to arrange things so that you'll feed him or maybe take him on a walk.
Love it. I thought that was a slightly off-topic question, but you're right. Probably 80% of the audience has recently got a puppy, so maybe it's more relevant than what I thought it would be.
Well, here's the point, though, towards, to get back to sales. When you are interacting with a customer, you are not reading that person's emotions. You are guessing. Your brain is guessing. And it's probably a good idea to be humble about the quality of your guesses. Even someone who feels like they are excellent at reading people, their brain is just guessing, and you can be wrong.
Love it. Okay, we'll wrap up the show with that, Lisa. I really appreciate your time and your insights on this. With that, tell us about, we've covered kind of one of the books. Tell us about both of them and where we can find out more about you as well.
Okay, so you can find out more about me at my public website, lisafeldmanbarrett.com. It's just my name.com. There are two books that you can find out about on that website. The first is How Emotions Are Made, The Secret Life of the Brain, which is available worldwide. The second book is just new in the US and coming out in the UK in March, called 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. So How Emotions Are Made is a pretty standard popular science book. It's about 300 pages long. It explains a lot about how emotions work, how you can control your emotions, some about how your brain works more generally. 7.5 Lessons About the Brain is a little book of essays. It's really written for people who don't think of themselves as that interested in science. But what it does is, in 7.5 little essays, it communicates some really cool ideas and facts about how brains work. So, you can talk to your friends or maybe your customers and kind of wow them with some, cool neuroscience tidbits. But it also invites you to think about what kind of a person you are or want to be, given that you have this kind of brain that you have. It's a very quick read. My husband calls it the first neuroscience beach read.
Love it. Well, I'll link to both books, your website, everything else that we talked about in this episode of the show over at salesman.org. I will give myself a quick plug, which I've not done for a while. Regular listeners will know that I host another podcast called Excited Science, where we try and get people excited about science. So maybe we can chat on there in the future, Lisa. I've not plugged that on this show for a while, so I'll plug it right there. And with that, Lisa, I want to thank you again for your time, your insights on this. Absolutely fascinating. You've cleared up a bunch of old sales training nonsense as well. I think that's really valuable for the audience. And I want to thank you again for joining me on the Salesman Podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you.